The day my ex-wife signed our divorce. Papers with a smile so wide it looked like she'd won the lottery until she saw me 3 years later, and her world fell apart. The pen hit the table before the ink was even dry. Victoria slid the papers back across to the mediator. Without reading the last page, she'd already read it. We both knew she had. She'd read every line, negotiated every clause, and extracted every dollar she could legally justify, all while telling anyone who'd listened that she just wanted closure. She got the house on Birchdale Lane, the joint savings account, which had $44,000 in it, the 2019 Audi, half my retirement, the good furniture, the good dishes, even the framed print we'd bought together in Savannah on our 5th anniversary, the one she'd always said she hated. She signed her name in one long theatrical stroke. Then she smiled, not a sad smile, not a relieved smile, a full, wide, teeth-showing grin that started before her hand left the page, the kind of smile people make when they've been waiting for something for a very long time. I sat across from her in that beige conference room in the Calhoun County Family Court building and watched her become a stranger in under 4 seconds. Not a gradual thing, instant, like a mask I'd never noticed, just dropped off her face and revealed the actual person underneath. The mediator said something. I nodded at whatever it was. Victoria was already on her phone, typing, thumbs moving fast. She didn't look up again. When we filed out, she walked ahead, confident, unhurried, pushed through the glass doors into the October afternoon and disappeared toward the parking lot. I stood on the courthouse steps in a suit I'd worn to 6 months of mediation sessions and watched the space where she used to be. She never looked back, not once. I drove home to my new address, a studio apartment on the 3rd floor of a building on Fletcher Street above a laundromat that ran machines until midnight. The elevator was broken. The hallway smelled like dryer sheets and something worse underneath. I'd paid first and last month's rent with what was left in my personal checking account, $2,100. After the settlement cleared, the apartment had a futon, a card table, a single lamp, 3 plates, and 2 bowls I'd bought at the dollar store the week before because I hadn't owned a single dish in my own name in 8 years. I sat on that futon and didn't move for a very long time. I need you to understand who I was before October 14th, 2021. I was 34 years old. I worked as a senior analyst at Harman Ambrakes Financial Group, a mid-sized firm downtown that handled portfolio management for institutional clients. It was stable work, well compensated, not spectacular. I made $87,000 a year and thought that was enough because Victoria was working 2 or so. I believed we'd met in 2013 at a mutual friend's birthday party. She was 26. I was 27. She was smart, well-dressed, quick with a joke, and she laughed at everything I said in those first months like I was the funniest man alive. I fell for it completely. Most men would have. We got engaged after 2 years, married in the summer of 2016 at a ceremony that cost $28,000, split almost evenly between both our families. My parents contributed $11,000, which was not a small number for them. My father had worked 30 years in manufacturing. My mother taught second grade. That $11,000 was meaningful in a way Victoria never quite grasped. The first 3 years of the marriage were genuinely good. I believed that then, and I still believe it now. We had a house we were proud of, friends we socialized with, vacations we saved for. Together, we had a routine, we had plans. The crack appeared in year 4, though I didn't name it that at the time. Victoria stopped working in late 2019. She had been in marketing at a regional firm and was laid off during a restructuring. I told her to take time, figure out what she wanted next, decompress. what I didn't understand, then what I would only understand much later was that Victoria had never particularly wanted to work. The job had been a placeholder. Our marriage had become one too. She spent 2020 at home. While I worked remotely, I told myself the pandemic had disrupted everyone's plans. I told myself she was looking. She was not looking. What she was doing, I would find out, was spending, not extravagantly, not all at once. She was too careful for that. Small charges, clothing, lunches, a gym she went to, twice a weekend trip to visit a friend in Charleston that I later discovered she did not take a loan. The charges were real. The explanations for them were not. She asked me for a divorce in February 2021. She said she'd been unhappy for 2 years. She said she felt unseen. She said she needed to grow. I asked her to try counseling. She agreed. We went 3 times. On the 4th scheduled session, she texted me from the waiting room. I don't think this is working. She had already spoken to a lawyer. By March, we were in mediation. The next 6 months were in education. I learned what it meant to be on the wrong side of a calculated negotiation. Victoria had hired Rachel Dow, a family law attorney in our county with a specific and well-earned reputation for maximum extraction settlements. I hired a competent but overworked attorney named Gareth, who handled too many cases and had a habit of returning calls 2 days late. Victoria's first move was to argue she had no income and therefore needed spousal support while she transitioned into the workforce. I pushed back. My attorney pushed back. It didn't matter. The court sided with temporary support of $1,400 a month while mediation continued. Her second move was the house. Birchdale Lane had appreciated $60,000 since we bought it. She wanted the house outright, arguing that she had managed the household and sacrificed her career trajectory for the marriage. I pointed out she had been laid off, not voluntarily unemployed. Her attorney produced a spreadsheet of household labor hours. Gareth had nothing comparable. We lost the house. The savings account I had never questioned because I had never had reason to. Victoria had always managed our joint finances. I handled my individual accounts. She handled the shared ones. I trusted her completely. When the mediator asked for statements, I learned that the account I believed held $44,000 actually held $44,000, but there had been another $31,000 in that account 8 months earlier. Victoria had moved it in increments of $2,000 and $3,000 over 5 months into a personal account she'd opened the previous November. The transfers were traceable. My attorney noted them. It changed nothing in the final settlement because proving intent at that stage would have required additional litigation I couldn't afford. I thought about fighting harder. I ran the numbers. Extended litigation would have cost more than I stood to recover. I signed the papers. She smiled. The month after the divorce was the lowest I've been in my adult life. I didn't cook. I didn't exercise. I went to work, came home, sat on the futon, and stared at the water stained ceiling above me. My boss, Diane Chin, pulled me aside in the 3rd week and told me I looked like a ghost. You look like a ghost, Cameron, she said. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm saying I'm worried. I'm fine, I said. She looked at me the way you look at someone who clearly isn't. I went back to staring at the ceiling. It was a Tuesday morning, I remember, because the laundromat below me ran its noisiest cycle on Tuesday mornings when I woke up, and the sadness was gone. It had been there every morning since the divorce, thick and settled. That morning it was just empty, and under the empty was rage. I got up, walked to the bathroom mirror, and looked at myself for the first time in weeks. Not a glance. Actually looked 31 pounds heavier than I'd been at our wedding. Skin with that gray, dry look that comes from too much microwave food and not enough daylight. eyes that had gone somewhere else. Who are you? I asked the mirror. The bathroom was quiet. The laundromat below was churning. Nobody I want to be, I said. I put on shoes and walked 2 blocks to a gym called Iron Core, not a wellness center, not a boutique studio. A real gym, exposed brick, free weights, heavy bags, fluorescent lighting, the smell of rubber and chalk. The guy behind the counter was a large man named Marcus, who looked like he'd spent his entire life preparing for a physical emergency. He looked me over without judgment. What are you training for? Victoria's face at that courthouse. Every negotiation I'd lost. Every conversation where I'd been outmaneuvered while I was still trying to be reasonable. Everything I said. Marcus nodded like that was a perfectly sufficient answer. 6 days a week for the next 4 months. I came in early. I stayed late. Marcus started coaching me without charging for it because I think he recognized something in the way I trained. A specific kind of anger that isn't aggression, but is something useful adjacent to it. The weight came off. The mind cleared. I slept better. I ate deliberately. The gray left my face, and something else came into replace. It's something sharper, but the gym was only part of it. I started filling my commute, podcasts on business, economics, behavioral finance, lunch. Breaks became reading sessions. Every book on entrepreneurship and client acquisition I could find. Nights in that studio apartment. After training, I took online courses in financial strategy, tax optimization, small business, consulting. I had always been good at my job at Harman and Briggs. What I had never done was apply that skill to something of my own. By month 3, I had the outline of a plan. By month 6, I had 3 clients I was advising on the side after hours, charging rates that were significantly below what the big firms charged because I wasn't carrying the overhead. Small business owners, a restaurant owner in the East Side District, a woman launching an online retail operation, a contractor who was 1 bad quarter from trouble. I helped them. They paid me. They referred me. My boss at Harman and Briggs found out about the side work. I expected anger. What I got was a measured conversation in which she told me I was violating a non-compete clause and I needed to stop or leave. I looked at my client list. I looked at my bank account. I looked at the studio apartment and thought about what I'd spent the last year building. I'll give you 2 weeks notice, I said. Diane blinked. You're serious? Yes. Cameron, this is a stable career. You're throwing it away. I'm building something. That's actually mine, I said. She shook my hand when I left 2 weeks later. She didn't seem surprised. The first full year on my own nearly broke me in a different way than the divorce had. There was no salary. There was no steady deposit every 2 weeks. There was only the work and the gap between what the work was worth and what people were willing to pay for it and the time it took to close that gap. I worked 40 plus hours a week building the business. I did the books myself. I handled client calls at 7 o'clock in the morning and responded to emails after midnight. I ate cheap and invested everything else back in. 5 clients became 15. 15 became 23. I hired a part-time bookkeeper named Sandra who had more organizational skill in 1 afternoon than I had in a week, and the operation became real when I registered Foster Financial Consulting as an LLC. I sat in my updated apartment, a 1-bedroom now, with actual furniture, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Calm, steady, present. I helped the restaurant owner restructure his debt and avoid bankruptcy by 9 days. He cried on the phone when I told him we'd done it. I helped a recently divorced single mother launch her boutique and price it correctly from the start. I helped a retired teacher in his 70s protect his pension from a predatory investment opportunity he'd been steered toward by someone he trusted. The work mattered. I mattered, and I had built it from Nothing on Fletcher Street above. Laundromat on a futon in the worst year of my life. By the time I moved into a condo on the west side, 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a view that I actually liked, I had stopped thinking about. Victoria almost entirely, not through effort, through genuine displacement. My life had gotten too full to leave room for her in it. My brother Daniel came to town in December of 2023, and we had Christmas dinner in my new place. I cooked. He sat at my kitchen island and looked around like he was doing math he didn't have the right equations for. You look like a completely different person, he said. I said. He nodded slowly. I mean that in the best possible way. No. I was worried about you, Cameron, after the divorce. I didn't say that at the time. I know that too. He raised his glass. I raised mine. We ate dinner and didn't talk about Victoria once. The gala was in March 2024. A client of mine, Thomas Whitfield, who sat on the board of Calhoun Regional Hospital, had invited me to their annual fundraising event. Black tie, marble floors, chandelier, heavy ballroom in the Meridian Hotel. The kind of event I would have attended with Victoria and spent the whole night feeling slightly out of place. I almost turned down the invitation. I'd been working 6 consecutive days. I was tired in the specific way that comes from prolonged focus, but something made me say yes. I had a tuxedo made, not rented, made by a tailor on Cortlandt Avenue who required 2 fittings and cost more than I'd spent on clothing in the entire year of my divorce. It fit the way expensive. Things fit like it was built around the specific version of you that exists right now, not some approximate idea of you. I got a fresh haircut. I went to the event. I stood in that ballroom with a drink I barely touched and felt for. The first time in a long time, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I was mid-con conversation with a potential client, a woman who ran a regional logistics company and was asking the right questions about cash flow management. When it happened, the prickle on the back of your neck, the kind that means someone nearby is looking too hard. I turned without meaning to. 20 feet away in a blue dress that had been carefully chosen was Victoria. She had a champagne flute raised halfway to her mouth, and she had completely stopped moving, not paused, stopped like the signal from her brain to her hand had been interrupted. She was staring at me. I held the eye contact. I didn't look away first. I watched her face go through several things in sequence. Shock, then a rapid reassessment, then something I didn't have a clean name for. It wasn't guilt. Exactly. It was closer to the expression of someone who has been keeping a very specific mental ledger and just discovered the numbers are wrong. She crossed the room toward me. Cameron, small voice, not the confident, decided voice I'd last heard in the Calhoun County mediation room. Something much more careful. Hello, Victoria. Her eyes went to the tuxedo, the posture, the missing weight, and the different thing that had replaced it, and she did the reassessment again with her whole face visible. I almost didn't recognize you. 3 years will do that. A beat of silence. The logistics woman had graciously stepped back. Then a man appeared behind Victoria. Tall, silver-haired, the specific kind of handsome that photographs well and reads as authority. In a room full of money, his hand landed on the small of her back in a way that was possessive and practiced. He had the look of someone accustomed to owning the space around him. Damon Reynolds. I'd heard the name once from a mutual acquaintance months after the divorce in the context of Victoria's been seeing someone. I noted it the way you note, whether on a day you're staying inside. Honey, he said, reading the silence. Who's your friend? Victoria opened her mouth and closed it. A flash of something went across her face. My ex-husband, she said. Damon looked at me with a calm, measuring kind of attention. Cameron Foster, that's right. Foster Financial Consulting. Yes, he extended a hand. I shook it. His grip was the grip of a man who has practiced it. I've heard of you, he said. Solid reputation. Good work with the East Side Restaurant Group. Someone I know mentioned you specifically. Victoria was very still. I thanked him. We exchanged a few professional sentences. He was warm, genuine even. The kind of man who had reached a level where he no longer needed to perform superiority because the room already knew. I understood immediately why she had moved toward him. He was everything she decided I wasn't capable of becoming. Except here, he excused himself to find someone across the room, kissed Victoria briefly on the temple, and left us standing there. She moved, first just slightly, just enough, toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the nearest cluster of conversation. I followed. The noise of the room fell half a notch. Her champagne was still in her hand. She wasn't drinking it. Cameron, she said my name again like she was testing whether I was real. I waited. You look. She stopped. Tried again. You've done well. I have. A pause. She looked at the floor for a moment, which was something I had never seen her do. Do you ever think about? She stopped again. I mean, do you remember the early days? Before everything. I looked at her very carefully. What is it you actually want to say, Victoria? Her composure held for another 3 seconds. Then it cracked just slightly around the edges, the way ice does before it goes fully. I think I made a mistake, she said very quietly, as if the words had cost her something significant. I held them there in the air between us without responding. Immediately, I let them exist, and that was when I noticed Damon Reynolds was not across the room anymore. He had come back quietly. Maybe he'd forgotten something, maybe instinct, and was standing 8 feet away with his phone extended and an expression on his face I had not been prepared for. Not anger, something worse than anger. He had the expression of a man who has just confirmed something he'd hoped he was wrong about. His jaw was set. His eyes were flat. On his phone screen, visible, even from where I stood, was a text message thread. I couldn't read the words, but I could see Victoria's name at the top, and I recognized that look on his face because I had worn it once in a beige conference room with a mediator between us on October 14th, 2021. I learned the rest in pieces over the following 2 weeks. The mutual acquaintance who had once mentioned Damon Reynolds' name was a woman named Petra, who had remained loosely in my orbit as a friend of a friend, and who reached out the Monday after the gala with a message that said, only did you know about her and Damien before the divorce? I didn't, but Petra did. She came for coffee on a Wednesday and told me what she knew. Victoria and Damon Reynolds had been involved for 14 months before I was served with divorce papers. Not a casual overlap, a sustained, deliberate parallel relationship. Victoria had Madame through a professional event in the spring of 2020, when she was still technically job searching, still technically living as my wife in her house on Birchdale Lane. The $31,000 that had moved out of our joint account in $2,000 and $3,000 increments was not, as I had vaguely theorized, being saved towards something personal. Petra had seen at some point some communication. She was careful about how much she told me, but the implication was clear. The transfers had been occurring during the period when Victoria was in some capacity building a life with Damien that ran alongside ours. And the house on Birchdale Lane, the one the court had granted her on the grounds of household contribution and career sacrifice. She had sold it 8 months after the divorce finalized. She had not moved in with Damien immediately. That had come later. The sale had netted her $124,000 in equity. I sat with that number for a while. I also sat with the fact that in the mediation, Victoria's attorney had emphasized repeatedly that Victoria was entering post-divorce life with no income, no assets outside the settlement, and no professional footing. She had presented as someone starting over. She had not been starting over. She had been landing somewhere she had already arranged. The $31,000 I could not prove intent on the house she was legally entitled to. None of it crossed a clear legal line in a way that would have changed the settlement outcome. I had been taken apart cleanly and carefully within the margins of the law. That was the full picture, finally assembled. I thought about being furious. I noticed I wasn't what I felt. Instead was something closer to clarity. A final piece of a puzzle that had already stopped matching, slotting into place. Confirmation of a thing I hadn't quite let myself believe. I hadn't been left because I was insufficient. I had been managed. There's a difference. A painful one, but also a useful one. I called Victoria. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting for something. I know about the timeline, I said. A long silence. Cameron, I'm not calling to fight. I'm not calling to threaten anything. I want to know one thing. She waited. Was there ever moment, I said, where you thought about telling me the truth and decided not to? Another silence longer this time. Yes, she said more than once. Yes. I let that sit. Okay, I said. Cameron. She stopped, started again. Damien. Found the texts, some of them from that time. It's complicated. I know, I said. I could see that at the gala. He wants answers. I can't really. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or something else. I didn't expect to see you there. I didn't expect a lot of things. You've built something real, she said. Not flattery, observation. I can see that. Yes. I didn't think you would. A pause. That wasn't kind of me. No. Another pause. Longer than the others. I'm sorry, she said. Not for the divorce. I do think that was right, but for how I did it, for the things I was doing while I was doing it. I sat in my condo and looked out the window at the city below. I heard you, I said. Thank you for saying it. And I meant that. Both parts. What are you going to do? She asked. The same thing I've been doing. I said. Keep building. I hung up. I don't know what happened with Damien. I didn't ask. And Petra didn't know the full story yet when I last spoke with her. Maybe they worked through it. Maybe they didn't. That chapter is hers to navigate. My brother called that night for unrelated reasons. And we talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. His kids, my business, a trip he was planning. At the end of the call, he asked how I was doing, genuinely the way he'd started doing after the divorce. Really well, I said. I can hear it, he said. I went to sleep at a reasonable hour and woke up the next morning without the particular weight that used to live in the first seconds of every day. I think about that courthouse moment sometimes, not with pain, not anymore. More like examining something from a distance. The way you look at an old photograph, recognizing yourself in it, but not quite belonging to the person you see. Victoria walked out of that building, smiling because she had won, except the thing she thought she was winning was a fixed amount, a house, a car, a settlement, a man waiting for her across town who had already arranged his world to receive her. What I was holding in that parking lot in that wrinkled suit with $3 store plates and a futon waiting for me on Fletcher Street was something she couldn't have calculated. A reason. You need a reason to become someone different than who you are. The comfortable version of your life will never give you one. Pain is a better teacher than stability. And I have the tax returns and the client list and the condo with the view to show for it. I don't credit Victoria for any of it. The work was mine. The decision to get up from that futon was mine. Marcus. And the weights and the courses and the early mornings and the late nights, all mine. But the reason that was hers, and in the strange arithmetic of grief and consequence, that is the one thing I'll allow her to keep. She looked like she'd won the lottery the day she walked out of that courthouse. She was right. We both did. She just hadn't read the numbers.